For the first time. I mean, we've spoken once before, but it was years ago, and it was for like 10 minutes at a Comic-Con. But Bret the Hitman Hart, the legendary Bret the Hitman Hart, is here. How's it going, man?
Things are good.
Things are good.
Having a good summer.
Yeah. I think we spoke once before for about 10 minutes at a Comic-Con, and it was when your action figure was coming out. And I think that was the new Mattel thing. And I think that was the first time, that was, if I remember right, the introduction to you kind of starting to get back into that WWE world.
Probably. I mean, I'm guessing, trying to picture, I've done a lot of interviews, so it's hard to remember which ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do recall being around here around the time the DVD, they did a sort of a peacemaking DVD with me that opened a lot of doors and kind of.
Is that what it did? Because that's what I was wondering. Because you've been a guy who even years ago, I mean, while you were still wrestling, would talk about how important your legacy was to you and how it was important that this career that you were building had something to show for it when it was done.
Yeah, I never wanted to look back on my career like it was a waste of time. Or
right.
None of it mattered or that I was irrelevant. I get offended by anything like that. I mean, I always thought when I did the work, like I did the matches, whether it was a SummerSlam or WrestleManias or whatever, or even Raw, like when I had my match, especially when knowing that it was going to be filmed and sort of it's a marker for life now. Like nobody erased, or shouldn't anyway. Like they should last forever, your matches.
So you weren't like a day-to-day guy. You were a guy who, especially like a pay-per-view or even a TV, in your mind, it was like, this isn't a match for tonight. This is a match that is going to live forever, and I want people.
I want to raise the bar. I want to have the best match ever tonight, like every night. Like especially for a big one.
Yeah.
Like an Iron Man match or Wembley, or it's like
even SummerSlam 91.
I want to raise the bar. I want to do so well that when somebody else is in the same shoes about 10, 20 years from now or 100 years from now, that they're not going to be able to top what I did today.
Yeah.
I stand by my matches.
How do you feel about your legacy and how it's maintained? Like now that you can actually look at your career as a package, is it what you wanted it to be?
I think so. I think you always you don't really know how to gauge those kind of things, but for me, I mean, I've stopped wrestling now since my last match was 99.
Right.
So it's quite a long time now.
Mm-hmm.
Most people that are, sort of analysts or experts on wrestling will still throw my name around as in the top 5 wrestlers of any era. And,
yeah.
So I think the fact that I took so much pride in my work was right. Like it was good. I did, and it pays off down the road. And I think, I know a lot of people today, especially now with the network. The network has been like a huge blessing for people that lost out on it, or like they can go back and watch any match or any pay-per-view.
Yeah, because I mean, you talk about like, everybody talks about the SummerSlams or the WrestleManias, but the matches like the match with the 1-2-3 Kid on an episode of Raw or those things, now they also have this opportunity to really last forever. You can find the episode and watch it in the context of the episode.
Yeah, so I think in that sense, I think I get all the credit that I was always hoping for. I think a lot of people still remember my work and my time period, my era.
Yeah.
As a really good time for wrestling, and I think it was too. I think I changed the industry a lot, and the way the wrestling is today. If you look at where wrestling's gone, say compared to where it was in 1988,
yeah,
it was not all what it is today. I mean, 1988, it was all about muscles and how big you were and how big your arms were, and guys like Warlord, and Hulk Hogan, and Warrior, and the Bulldogs, and everything was about how jacked up you could look in the ring and how like ridiculously, obscenely ripped with muscles you could be.
Yeah.
And if you really look back on those days, like Warrior and Hogan and whatnot, the wrestling wasn't so good. Like you can watch, the Hulk Hogan's 5 greatest matches, and they're all the same. His work is the same. His performance levels are very limited. The promos are the same. It was all, and it was kind of like that. And a lot of guys were doing the same old stuff every night, and I changed that. I think
it feels like, I think when you look back at that era, and you can even get into the early '90s with it, because even when you win your first WWF championship in '92, that was a shock to fans because a wrestler like you wasn't really in the WWF title picture. Like that was long before any talks of.
That was a huge long shot.
Yeah.
You know what?
It wasn't an athletic.
If they'd even had a
championship.
few months, if they told me like in June, like, hey, we're gonna put the belt on you at SummerSlam or whatever it was, I would have got knifed in the back, and had that idea would have been shot down by so many other wrestlers and so many other people say, like, you could never do that. Don't put down Bret Hart. He's the and they would have killed that idea. But the only reason I think I got the belt was Vince took a big chance, made a kind of a. We were just talking about how Vince sometimes makes rash decisions and goes in a completely different direction, and that's what he did
On that day.
On maybe the day before or a couple of days before. But I never had any warning. Like when I showed up in Saskatoon, the day I won the world title for the first time, I had no idea that that's what it was going to be, or that I would win.
How does somebody like you work under those circumstances? Because you're a guy who like obviously cares about the long term, and everything is like even you're having these matches, and you're in your late 20s and early 30s, and most people at that age are thinking about what's happening right now. You're already thinking about legacy and career and lifetime, and to have that, you have to work in these conditions where stuff just changes on a whim. There's not always this long-term vision that the performer has.
Well, there was never any guarantees about anything, and all I did was survive.
Yeah.
I just wanted to always hang on to my job. Survive. But in doing that and surviving and sort of just doing whatever they tell you to do to the best of your ability, which is what I kind of did all the time. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you see your peers and some of the people that are with you or started out with you that are starting to get pushes and starting to become guys like, you see guys like Rick Rude or Kurt Hennig, they're all like my era,
right?
And they're all getting their chances.
Right.
And so you got to be patient. And it's like, okay, well, they're going to take a look at me pretty soon. I'm working my ass off, and I'm starting to really kind of turn heads as far as fans. Like I could feel it, and hopefully they'll start feeling it too. And in my case, I think they were really slow to kind of get behind the Bret Hart train.
Mm-hmm.
It took a long time, but when Vince finally did get behind the train, the fans, all those years of the fans have been sort of wanting them to do something with me and they should do something with Bret Hart.
Yeah.
Bret Hart. And I remember lots of. I remember the agent, Chief Jay Strongbow, always coming back every night and going, I don't know why they don't do anything with you. You're the hottest, and he'd always praise me. And that was in the early days, like 85, 87 and stuff like that. And it's like, so I kept kind of staying in there, but I didn't get my chances. But when I did, I made the most of it. I didn't, I think that another big part about my success or the fact that they picked me or singled me out to go, okay, let's go with this guy, is I was really reliable. I mean, I never missed a shot. I never got hurt. I never hurt anybody. I was really safe. I was always a total pro, and I had a lot of like whatever I wanted. Like I could come up with a lot of ideas for a lot of. I had my own input in a lot of my matches, so it wasn't like anybody come back and tell me how to have a great match. I'd go out there and give them a great match when they didn't expect it.
Yeah.
And again, I worked really hard, and I grew up in the wrestling business, so I had a lot of background. I had a lot of education in wrestling. I mean, when I worked for my father, I mean, I could run the whole show. I could give the first match, the second match, the 10th match. I give everyone their finishes, make sure everyone's matches were under a certain time. And I mean, I was a good organized guy from the business. I knew the business upside down.
Did you ever think about, obviously in later years, because you weren't doing anything with them for a long time, but sliding into a role of like an agent or a producer or something like that over at WWE? Because that seems like a valuable skill set.
I hesitated on that for a long time. It was about 4 years ago. I went to them and I made kind of threw the ball at them, threw the pitch, made that pitch. That I'd like to be part of the, giving them ideas and help with the writing of the show or the creating of the matches and how the storylines could go and stuff. Because I think I would have been really good for them.
Yeah.
But, I sort of made the offer, and the way it came back to me is I remember it was like, well, what about the schedule?
Right.
And it's like, well, I don't want to be on the road every day, but I could fly in for TVs is what I think I left. I said, just come in for TVs for the day before.
Right. Even doing, they split the brands coming in on a Monday or a Tuesday.
I made the offer, and they're like, thank me for it. It was Vince and Triple H, and it's like I just went home.
Would you make the move to Orlando and try to do something in that performance center, or are you more interested in the TV part of it?
It could be figured. It could be worked out. If I mean, it's not impossible. I mean, I could just go anywhere. Sometimes it's like a change of scenery might be fun, but I'm also very happy where I'm at.
Right.
So I got a beautiful house and a home and a life that I don't really, if you've, as an example, we said, hey, I'll just work Monday night Raws and be there for that.
Yeah.
Sounds good for me, but realistically, it's like, they need more. Like,
Yeah.
I think they look at their agents, whether it's Mike Rotundo or Arn Anderson or whoever these people are. They're 7 days a week. They're on the road all the time.
Yeah.
That's what they want, that kind of commitment and that kind of
Consistency.
dedication. I don't really have that, and I understand. So maybe that's why I didn't get the call. I said I want to be a helper, but I don't want to give my life away to do it.
Right. Almost like a consultant type.
But I know
role.
that I could. I'll give you an example, and I want to mention it because it's something that has come up a few times. But it's like I remember showing up at the WrestleMania. I think it was the one in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Is
it
it
was
like
Brock
20?
Lesnar and Triple H wrestled.
Yeah. That was was that New York?
I think it was Phoenix.
Okay.
I'm guessing. I might be wrong. But
Okay.
I remember when Triple H fought
Brock.
Lesnar. I remember thinking, I had so many ideas for stuff they could do in their match.
Yeah.
And I can remember I could see them talking and working out their match. And I remember going, I should go over and just say, hey, I got a couple ideas. And I remember, I said, nah, it's not my place to do that. So I didn't do it. But then I watched the match. And it was, I think it's famous now, my quote about being a 4 out of 10. But it was a 4 out of 10 match. It wasn't nothing special. It wasn't anything that I didn't predict in my mind before I thought, like, this is what they're going to do. It was about what they did. And it was like nothing creative, nothing really stood out after the match. And I remember thinking, I could have made that match really awesome.
Yeah.
I could have really given them a couple of little things that would just take that match up a couple of notches and make it different than any match that either one has ever had. And so I know that there's a potential there to pass on some good
Right.
ideas.
There's
and
a role for you.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah.
I regretted that I didn't do it, and I think a lot of my criticisms of that match are sort of misunderstood, or it's like me sort of trying to tear down Triple H or get old shots in on him, and that's what it was. That's not what I was trying to say.
Right.
What I was trying to say is I could have made that match better. I could have really, I'll give you an example, and it's a long sort of roundabout way of talking about it, but. I remember when I had the Iron match with Shawn Michaels.
Right.
And we had so much thought into the match as it was. We only saw each other the day of the show.
And if I could say something about that match too, like I was talking about it the other day. That's the only reason I bring it up, because that match, I was 12 years old when that match happened. It was WrestleMania 12, and as a 12-year-old, I was thinking to myself when it was pitched. I was like, I don't know anything about an hour-long wrestling match. Like, this is going to be boring. I'm 12, I got a short attention span. And I said this the other day, that was the match that, clicked this thing on in my brain as to, I like wrestling matches, because I sat there for the whole hour, and it was this thing that really hadn't been done on WWF at the time, television before. And it honestly made me watch in a whole different way and appreciate things on a whole different level.
Well, I like building an Iron Man match and the time and all the falls. There turned out to only be one, of course. But,
Yeah.
There's a lot of thought that got to go into all that. And I've wrestled a lot of hour matches. And hour matches are hard because they start to drag. After about, once there's around the 10-minute mark, people start going, I hope these guys aren't going to go an hour. And it's like, yeah, we're going an hour.
Right.
Nobody knows it till it's about the 45-minute mark when they go, okay, yeah, they are going an hour.
Yeah.
And so they're hard to keep everyone's attention. And I remember in that match, when we had the whole match figured out, it was like I was worried about losing the fans, losing their attention. I remember sort of figuring it all out and said, we kind of need something from the 15-minute mark to the 25 or 30 minutes. That's where you got to that's where you lose them, is that close. When you get around 30 minutes, And if you, depending on whether you used all your best stuff up or you're saving your best stuff for that other half of the match, or there's a part there where you can lose the whole interest of that whole audience, where they just like they feel like, oh shit, it's an hour match. This is gonna be I already can know the rest of it without even watching, kind of thing. But Pat Patterson came up with that idea with Tony Chimo with the kick on the floor where he kicked the timekeeper and they took him out in a stretcher.
Yeah.
I've always said that is as a one example is what Triple H and Brock Lesnar needed. They needed something just a little different, off the beaten path, that hadn't been done every night, or wasn't him doing the pedigree on a table for the billionth time.
Right.
Something that was out of the ordinary. Like people go, what the heck's happening? They kick the timekeeper and he's out cold, and they take him out in a stretcher. But that little distraction of like that whole spot took about 3-4 minutes by the time we got him out of there and we got back in the ring, kind of got back to the story. But I always thought that got us over the hump. If you watch that match back,
sure, that's really interesting.
That got us over the hump of that boring part where they lose interest.
Yeah.
And we kept their interest, and then we had them the rest of the match. But it's like it's a small little thing. But
yeah, and you see that little thing, and you're like, this is different.
Remember that.
Yeah.
And I remembered something like that's what Triple H and Brock Lesnar needed. Something like that. It didn't have to be the exact spot, but something that's a little that nobody expected.
Yeah.
And I know if I sat down with the three of us, we'd come up with something like that pretty quick that would have made that match just so much better. And that's why I say it was a 4 to 10, because there's no imagination, nothing special. It's WrestleMania.
Right.
If you can't go to WrestleMania, any wrestler, and do one move or one idea that is different or that you've never done before, or let's try this tonight, even if it fails, even if it doesn't work, it's still, you got to give props to these guys that come up with new stuff or try new stuff. Like I can remember when I fought Kurt Hennig here in New York when I won the Intercontinental title, we had some spot where we were going to try to climb up the turnbuckle. And if you remember, and I think it was we were going to be fighting at the top of the turnbuckle, and I can't remember what happened, and I think we were going to suplex him in the ring. I think I was going to suplex him back into the ring or something. But I remember when we did it, it didn't really work so well, and we ended up sort of falling in the ring. But, we never lost anybody's interest in trying to do the spot. But the fact that we brought it to the show, we brought an idea that maybe it'll work, maybe it'll help. In the end, it didn't do that much. It didn't hurt the match. But you gotta at least appreciate guys that are gonna try new things, try something, even if it fails.
Right.
As opposed to, so many wrestlers that just do the same thing every single night. I mean, I have a hard time with today's wrestlers. Nobody sells anything. Nobody tells a story. I prefer to watch wrestling where people sell, and it's easier, and the pace. Like everyone's high spot monkeys today. I mean, I haven't.
So you're not a big fan of the stuff that's going on in like New Japan, for instance, right now.
Well, I can't say I'm fresh on it. I'm not.
But that's where you see a lot of that sort of fast-paced, high spot, multi-person.
I like new stuff, and I see a lot of with some of the New Japan and some of the guys from there. You see new stuff and you like it. I appreciate that, and I always applaud the guys that bring new stuff. But Japan, probably the same thing where nobody sells, and it's so much easier. And it's so much fun. It's a much more fun story to watch people actually sell.
Do you think part of it, and you were there as this was all happening, is that now there are so many big matches every single day? Every TV has the big pay-per-view match, and by the time you get to the pay-per-view, I don't remember a pay-per-view where you haven't seen the match before on one Raw or SmackDown or another. Like the style has completely changed. Whereas you remember, in the early 90s and before, it was this thing where you would just announce this big match is happening. And for a month, it would just be a build to one match. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And then, it's a different.
Yeah, I liked it the way it was. I mean, I don't know. I like a lot of the new sort of thinking in wrestling. Like a lot of it's really good, but I think, I don't know, like the idea of like somebody being in a pay-per-view. Like let's say I'm going to fight Kurt Hennig this tomorrow in a SummerSlam or something. It's when me and Kurt Hennig would wrestle, we wouldn't wrestle. We'd be off for 6 weeks or months, a couple, or be a fresh, like nobody's seen us wrestle at all for a long time.
Right.
And so there's a lot of freshness to this one match. And of course, you don't got a lot of stuff down. You're not wrestling each other every night. Like some of these guys, like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, every time I turn on the TV, they're wrestling again and again and again, and they'll be wrestling again next week because they need a great match. But I think they tire out the product where it's like, who can get sick of watching Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn wrestle? I mean, it happens. You get sick of good wrestling.
Yeah.
It's like every night, every time I turn on TV, they're wrestling again.
And that's the worst, right? When you find yourself getting sick of a great match.
Wrestling. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I kind of like the way it worked before, where they kind of kept you away from each other until you had the match. And like I notice sometimes now, like they're doing like on Monday Night Raw, they're wrestling the same match that they're going to have on the pay-per-view. And so they wonder why they're the tickets for SummerSlam are not going so briskly as they like. People already seen it.
Who do you like right now when you watch? Like, what wrestlers do you
I really like the Canadian guys. I love Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn are both two of my favorites. I like it's hard not to like Randy Orton just for good, solid, steady. Even John Cena. I love John Cena. I think he's one of the greatest wrestlers ever. I'm really a big fan of his work ethic, his ability to work with younger guys and have good matches. I watched him, I think, on Monday Night Raw or Nitro or not Nitro, but I'm not sure if he's with SmackDown or Raw. But I watched him just last week, and I thought he had a great match. I admire him for always being a steady pro and always being a guy that goes in there and gives 100%. There's a lot of guys, you don't have to be the greatest high spot guy to be a great wrestler. I mean, I think it's all, wrestling is all, it's a performance art.
Right.
And you want to have a different story or try to, like when I wrestled Bam Bam Bigelow or if I wrestled Yokozuna, and even if I wrestle them like the next day apart from each other, the next day it's going to be a completely different match. It's not going to be the same match I had with Yoko the night before.
Right.
It's just not. I don't do that. To me, every match and every performer is an artist, and you got to cater to their needs. I would do my best to give Jim the Anvil a better match than he ever had with anybody else, or Bundy or whoever else I had to work with. Like to me, it was important to give back to them and bring out the best that they have. And I one of my biggest sort of the things I appreciate the most about my career or makes me feel good is so many wrestlers that I know have told me years and years after my career that the best match that they ever had was with me, and then they'll tell me where it was. Like, it was in the pay-per-view with this, or it was from Scott Hall to Kevin Nash to Bundy to Bam Bam Bigelow to they all, Davey Boy. And then there's guys that I did have so many great matches with, but they had their best moments in the ring with me. And there's a lot of wrestlers that will tell you that their favorite match they ever had was with wrestling me. And that makes me feel good because I was never a greedy I wasn't a guy that ate up my opponents or it was all about me in the ring. It was about us and the story we're going to tell.
Yeah. I mean, and I've read your book, obviously, and I think it's the best wrestling book that's been released, and a lot of wrestling books have come out. But, I mean, just because of the detail and the full story that's in that book is incredible. But one of the things, like you talk about, and you've talked about it since then, is the match with Davey Boy Smith in Wembley at SummerSlam '92. And how he blanked on everything, and that was your match. You brought him through the match. That's got to give you, when you know that like I did this match. This was me doing this. That's got to give you a tremendous boost of confidence when you realize that you guys did pull off a classic, and it was one-sided, and nobody realized it.
I always thought that Wembley, in particular, that day, when I pulled that match off, and we pulled that match off, but I know I did a lot of the work and did a lot of the thinking for that match,
right.
all of the work and all the thinking in a lot of ways. But I knew that something was going to shake and something was going to change after that match. And I think it was about a month later, I was world champion.
Yeah.
And I always thought people, I remember when Davey took the Intercontinental belt, he thought it was like, step aside, old man, I'm going to
Yeah.
be the star now. And I was like, just wait. Just be patient because this match made me, not you.
Yeah.
And it's true. And I think the Iron Man match was another one. I wouldn't say it made me, but I held my own against Shawn.
Yes.
Like that whole match was all about Shawn.
Right.
It was supposed to make Shawn, the promos, the build-up, even the promos we did together in the ring. I remember he did some promo with Roddy Piper in the ring where I made some comparison to the Energizer Rabbit or whatever. But I remember that interview was all designed from Shawn to sort of one-up me on everything I said. Shawn was going to had a cuter comment or a funnier remark or to zing me on it was like Shawn was getting the big push, and it's like I didn't matter. I was just the guy holding the belt to give it to him.
Yeah.
And I saw that, and it bothered me. That really bothered me. I didn't want to be like that. I didn't think it was right. I didn't think it was fair. I just think my momentum and my sort of position in the business was still real hot, and I was really still carrying my end of things. And so the Iron Man match, even though it was built around Shawn, I remember when it was the way it worked and the way I walked back to the dressing room after it was over. I said, these people, they haven't forgot about me.
Right.
It's not just
So
the crowning of a new king. It's like the old king's still here.
And that became pretty evident because that ended up, you walked away for a while, but that brought you into this whole, probably the most successful era of your career, first with the Austin stuff, which is just incredible, and then getting into the, late 90s Hart Foundation, which is, amazing stuff.
I think in 97, even 96, I was in my absolute prime.
I would agree. As a fan.
I was never better. I was uninjured. I had a handful of injuries in my career. Everything was, I was like ready to go, ready to make some serious changes, like not changes, but like to make a difference in the business and to really have my all-time classic matches. Like I would like to have had. It's a shame that the screw job happened in so many ways, but especially from the fact that there was no more matches with Shawn. Like I never got to work with him again. I never got to work anymore with Steve Austin. Can you imagine the matches I could have had with Rock when he was finally over?
Yeah.
And so many other guys. I wish even when I went to WCW that I could have had some of those kind of matches with Benoit and some of those kind of guys. It's just a shame that things happened the way they did. But I 97, I had so many great matches. It was such a strong year for me. I love when I think about the SummerSlam with Undertaker.
Yeah.
I just watched that match this week. I hadn't seen it in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
What a great match. What a wonderful story. And, two wrestlers that had so much respect for each other and took so much pride in their work. I've always, I look back on 97, the matches I had with Steve Austin, the matches I had with, even the screw job itself was a really good match.
It was.
The screw job,
Yeah.
And, that was all planned. Like that way that match built was all planned. And then the bell starts. We still had another 25-minute match. That was all planned out that we never got to. The screw job ended it.
So you had about 20 minutes left in that match.
Yeah.
Wow.
The whole match, when they started the bell is when it just was going to start. Now the whole wrestling match starts.
Right.
And if you look at
because there'd been a lot of brawling and stuff going on before that. Yeah.
Vince and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was great energy and great. It was great. It was like I was on my way to having this. All I cared about and always cared about was just this great, beautiful match. And we're telling this story. And I think if the screw job had not been written into this whole thing without my knowing, but it would have been a classic.
Yeah.
It would have been maybe the best Shawn Michaels Bret Hart match that we talk about.
Right. And it's become memorable because of what it did and because of the story behind it, but not the match itself.
And it could have it never happened. Like it just got ended. Like it was like when that spot with the sharpshooter with Shawn reversing it was planned, and it was just a spot. And to give you, it was a pretty good spot, like a big momentum changer. But that was just in the first 5 minutes of the match.
Yeah.
Because we only started just a few minutes before that. But, the best stuff was still coming. All the real spots, the big turns that we scheduled in that match were on their way, but we never got to do them.
Are you glad that Wrestling with Shadows exists? Because, you talk about a documentation of what that year was and leading up to... it's really sort of mind-boggling that there's that kind of record of that year and the screw job at the end. Like, it's crazy that all lined up.
And that it was as good a documentary.
It was
Like,
really
well filmed and really
great.
tight. I'm so grateful for it in the sense that even when I did it, and even if the screw job had never happened, it was just such a magical time in my life and my career.
Yeah.
And I knew when I did it, it's like I want this to be a capsule of my career and something like about wrestling. I wanted to capture something that we'll never get back. Like if I hadn't filmed that, like it'd be hard to explain to people what wrestling was like for me. Because my era, I was the king of the world of wrestling in 90, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97. Business had taken a bit of a slump after Hogan and the steroids and all the different scandals. And I always make the comparison that I was the guy that pulled the sword out of the stone to kind of get things. I was never the biggest draw. I don't pretend that I was in WWF at the time. I wasn't like Hogan, where I was packing the place, where there was 25,000 people and 5,000 of them are outside the building trying to get in for a pay-per-view and stuff. Wrestling was red hot when Hogan was at the peak of his career in the 84, 85, 86. I got things when they were kind of going down, all the scandals, they had a black eye wrestling, and it was like, quick, what do? We stick the belt on a guy that's got no drug problems, no issues, never misses a show, never gets hurt. Here, you hold the ball. Because they were actually talking about Vince going to jail and giving us our orders and our finishes and stuff from jail. He was still going to run wrestling from jail. They had all these contingency plans. But I can remember thinking,
like a mafia organization.
Yeah. But it's I took things on at a tough time.
Yeah.
And I always thought, I stopped there was nobody going down. It wasn't sinking anymore. And if you really look, it started to come back up.
Mm-hmm.
It started to come back all on my run.
Yeah.
I took it when it was going down. I mean, I had Sergeant Slaughter say to me one time, he goes, "You saved wrestling."
Really?
Yes. It was a huge compliment. He explained to me the same way. That's how I kind of came to that idea. It's like, you saved wrestling. Where would we be without you? Like, wrestling was going straight down the shitter. There was nobody to stop it, and it was like wrestling was in big trouble, and you pulled it back and saved it.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. People talk about, like, when you talk about the Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars and stuff, people talk about the WWE succeeding in, 99 and 98 and 2000 when they really started to, crush WCW and Austin and The Rock. But it's like when you go back and you really watch what was going on that show, and whether you were in the room or not, I would say like 97, that era, 97 is the best year for the show.
I agree. And I think that most wrestlers would probably, if they took a look at it and study, think about it, they would agree.
Storytelling and all that. And it's also funny about the Wrestling with Shadows documentary because you opened it up to your family, and I picture your son as like a little kid. Like I see him today, and he's like a man, but all I got in my head. Same thing happened with Mick Foley's daughter in that Beyond the Mat. Like when I met Noelle, I'm like, what? No, you're the little kid jumping on the bed and playing wrestling and stuff like that.
Well, I've always been really grateful for like the Wrestling with Shadows. There's one part, if you're ever watching that, where after the screw job, where I'm on the airplane, and I'm flying back to Calgary, and I got a big cold sore. I was all stressed out. I got a big, huge cold sore about the size of a quarter on my lip, and I was so stressed out and so mad. It's still really mad at that time. Like I was mad for a couple months, but I remember the producer or the film director came up and he goes, and they're filming me, and while I'm sitting on the airplane, which kind of bugged me, and I was about ready to tell them to get the hell away from me give me a break for a few minutes, because they'd been filming me for 3 days or something. But I just remember I was so pissed off, and he said, he goes, "This is going to be great. We got the ending we were looking for.
Yeah.
Because you're going to love it. We got everything." And I was remembering, I said, you didn't get the punch. And it's like, "No, we didn't get the punch." I said, "Well, you didn't get anything." There's no way you can tell this story. No one's going to know what happened. He goes, "Trust me, we got it."
And man, the limping out of your dressing room has become, that's wrestling folklore. Like that is a classic. Like you didn't even need the punch because that shot from below where he's like limping out. I mean, that's the end. That's it. Like they did get it without getting it.
That was a big moment.
Yeah.
I remember when I cleared them out. I remember I said, yeah, maybe I should get out of here. And it was like, they were all like, really? We want to film? Like, no, get out, or this is not time for documentary time. And it was like a minute later, I knocked them out. And it was like, and even then.
Hang on, let me get you on over there too. Go ahead.
I remember when, like, I'm sitting in the room.
This is your son, by the way, from who we're talking about.
Remember Shawn's like, I swear to fucking God. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed
No,
to
go
swear,
ahead,
but
yeah.
I remember I'm sitting right there. I'm probably 7 years old. And I remember you're like, you gotta probably take 5 outside. And even when Vince comes out, I'll stagger. And I got the foam finger, and I remember I'm doing the old Catholic arm, letting him through. I could tell he's ready to kick that foam finger off my hand. But
Do you have like real memories of all this stuff that we're talking about from '97 and being in the room?
I was pretty young, but
Right.
I remember a lot of stuff. Like, I remember my mom chewing out Hunter, like even just not even on the documentary, but I remember standing there watching my mom chew him out. Like,
Right.
I remember Kelly Rimple trying to kind of calm my mom down, but that was I remember the whole, like, the tension too. I remember they were asking me, like, you know, what do you, like, do you know what's going on? Like, I had no idea. I just remember I had to say goodbye to, like, the headbangers and stuff. And
Right.
sad about that. Like,
What? Yeah. How old were you when you kind of figured out like what this whole story had been? Because I'm sure, like, obviously your dad brought it home, and it wasn't this thing that just existed and you moved on.
well, remember, who was it that had that one match? Remember, and they threw that punch, and I went in the back, and I was like, what was that?
Oh, Scott Hall. Yeah, that was WCW. And yeah, that was Blade came back after Scott Hall. I brought him to one of my or it wasn't a pay-per-view. It was just a match, Nitro, I think, and might have been Thunder actually in Salt Lake City. And Scott Hall had some match where he threw a really lousy punch for a finish or something. I remember he came back after, and Blade was just a little kid. Came up and said, "That punch was what kind of punch was that?" And everyone in the dressing room just popped because it was like Scott was like, you know, sprays Ramon. It's like walking in, he didn't even know how do you answer a little kid that tells you your wrestling was the shits. Yeah.
Well, Bret, the reason you're in town is because you're doing work with a pretty great company called House of Glory Wrestling. Which anybody, you know, if you get the chance to get out there, it's an East Coast promotion, a lot of New York shows. You know, a lot of these promotions end up in Jersey and stuff. There's not that many good indie wrestling shows that are happening in the boroughs of New York. So House of Glory is a great promotion. I don't know if you've done work with them
No,
before.
I'm just getting to know them, but they've been great with me, and I'm really looking forward to. I always love coming to New York. I mean, you know, they always say it's the Mecca, but it is the Mecca, and there's so much of New York is a part of my rich history. Like, my mom was from New York. She met my dad, who, when he was down here in 1946, I think, or 47 or something like that, when he started. But I mean, everything was all the connections that my dad had when he opened up Stampede Wrestling, including Vince's grandfather. They were all connections that helped make Stampede Wrestling, which is a million miles from here, work. They're all connections from New York that my dad made. So New York's been a big part of my life and wrestling, and you know, even the names. Like, my dad would get big names. I remember meeting Bruno Sammartino in 1964 or something like that. He was just made champion, and you know, seeing him, meeting him, knowing him as a little kid, and then seeing him on the magazines, and like just knowing, like, hey, Bruno Sammartino wrestled in Calgary. You know,
Yeah.
there was a lot of history and a lot of New York in my sort of understanding of the business, and I always welcome coming back here. The greatest fans in the world.
When did you regain your enthusiasm for wrestling? Because, I mean, for obvious reasons, you were not enthusiastic about the business at all for some time.
Well, I think WCW will kill any kind of joy in your life. When it comes, like, I think I started to hate money and everything. Like, everything good is.
Because you just look at your paycheck and you're like, I know what I had to do to. Ugh.
Only made $100,000 this week. Those bastards. You know,
It's not worth it.
the money they paid me was insane. Like, and I'd fly all the way down. I'd be off, and I'd fly down in first class airplane, first class luxury car, and first class hotel and all that, and then have Eric Bischoff come up and tell you about 5 after 6 o'clock. Go up and tell you you're off tonight. It's like, I flew all the way down here for what? It's like, don't worry, it's a day off your. You know, you had so many days you had to work. And I was like, it's a
But
day.
it counts as one of your contracted days.
Yeah. So it's like, but it was always like, I didn't go there to dog it. I
Right.
came there to work. I want to tear this place apart. I want to let me wrestle. Give me something. You
Yeah.
know? And it's like they They were so bad. They'd kill any hope in anybody. They'd destroy anybody.
Wow.
I don't have a good thing to say about Eric Bischoff or anything he ever did. That guy was, talk about the Midas touch. He was the opposite. He could kill your career. He was too stupid to know what a career was, or that actual passion.
Yeah.
Like if you have passion for your matches and you have a genius for wrestling talent, didn't mean anything to Eric Bischoff. He was the worst loser maggot that ever got into wrestling. He was just the worst. I have nothing. He's a nice enough guy, but he was just the worst. I feel so bad because I went to WCW really wanting to make a difference. And I think if you look at WCW and all the names that they had and all the wrestlers and all the other things, they had everything. All they needed was somebody that knew what to do, like someone with half a brain.
And I would think that after what happened to you, you would want to go to WCW and shove it up Vince's ass, right?
Right.
That would be the plan, and then you
I've
can't.
seen Eric Bischoff. I've heard his quote, which is probably why I get pretty hostile about Eric Bischoff, about Bret Hart came here. He was like a broken toy, or he didn't.
That's what he said.
Didn't have the same fire. Like I could strangle him when I hear him say that, because it's like that is so not true. I was like on fire, I wanted to take the world on. I wanted to take that whole company. I wanted to kick Vince right in the teeth and give him like the best matches. Booker T, give me Benoit, give me Sting, give me Hogan, give me all these guys. We'll turn this thing. Let's get this thing really rocking here. Mm-hmm. And he was such an idiot. I mean, I would say all that right to him if he was sitting there.
I believe you.
You are an idiot, and you cost everybody. Like, look at wrestling today; it's a monopoly.
Yeah.
So the wrestlers themselves have no leverage of any kind. They can't. It's like, oh, if you don't pay me, I'm going to go to WCW like the old days. That was so much better for the wrestlers, because then we have a bargaining table. But today, no. And that's all Eric Bischoff's fault. He killed the wrestling business.
Wow.
He was the worst.
Well, I'll tell you, after this, all I want to do in life is get you and Eric Bischoff in the same room and do it on my show. That's
It wouldn't be fun. I mean, I like Eric. Like he was always nice to me. There's things that he did, like he flew me home after my brother Owen died. He put me on a Lear jet and flew me home and paid me all the whole summer and the whole winter of being off at a ridiculous wage. You know, he did a lot of good things like that. But at the same time, you know, he lied to me and just killed my career.
Yeah.
He like, sign this contract and come join us, and we're going to kill your career. That's what we're going to do.
I mean, thank God that you were able to just tie a bow on it by coming back to WWE, doing the WrestleMania thing, doing the thing with like just that there's some kind of at least some closure to it.
When I think about Shawn, and I've said this a few times, but with, you know, after, like when I came back and did that storyline with Shawn, it was something when I remember it's like I'll make truce with Shawn. We'll make peace. We could do it right in the ring. I remember telling Vince that, and it's like really? And it's like, it was like, yeah, I'll be happy to shake his hand and talk to him and treat him, bury the hatchet with him. And I think Vince was kind of shocked by that. I think it was a big step on my part.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I always thought, I said, you know, when I went back, and even before I met Shawn, the day of that Monday Night Raw in Dayton, I remember thinking, I'm going to probably look back about 3 or 4 months from now and be really sorry that I ever did any of this with him, that he's not going to change, that it's not going to mean anything to him. And I was just, you know, I just kind of guessed that. And, you know, I was wrong, and I'm glad I was wrong.
That's great. That's great
Shawn
to hear.
came back, and I think he I always say this about it, he appreciated that gesture so much. It was like, I think he was under so much guilt and shame, and what he did was something to be ashamed of. And it was you know, wrestling is all about trust and respect. And he didn't have the trust and respect for me in the first place back then, which is how that whole storyline happened. The whole screw job is based on a single conversation between me and Shawn, maybe a month before the screw job, where I stopped him and said to him in San Jose, I said, we're wrestling each other at Survivor Series in 3 weeks or 4 weeks or something. And he said, yeah, I just found out today. And I said, I just want you to know, I have no problem doing anything you want. I said, I know we've had our issues. I said, but if I got to drop the belt to you, I have no problem with that. And I want you to know that if you're ever in the ring with me, you're always safe. I'm a total professional. I would never if I've got some kind of issue with you, I'll talk to you in the dressing room or something, but I'll never take those things to the ring. That's the time when you have to be professional. And I remember I said that to him, and I remember Shawn looked at me, and this is where it all came from, is he looked at me and said, well, I appreciate that, but I just want you to know that I'm not willing to do the same thing for you. And when he said that, it was like, I just promised this guy, I just said I'd drop the belt to you, you know, so you tell me to stick it up my ass kind of thing. And it's like, that's where all the problem was.
Right.
That's what the screw job wasn't about me being Canadian or it wasn't on the right day or it was all about a wrestler that I offered to lose the title to.
So you would have lost the title to somebody else that night in Montreal.
Yeah, I was told I'd lose the belt to Lombardi. Yeah, so Lombardi won the Battle Royal. I was supposed to work with me in the Garden.
Yeah.
I even said, I did swear to God, I said I'll even drop the belt to Lombardi in the Garden. I'll drop it to anybody. I'll even drop it to Shawn after he loses to me to show me that he's going to lose.
Gotcha.
I will drop it to him tomorrow, but he's going to have to lose to me today to show me that I need that respect from him first. And, you know, they always say, oh, well, it can't end a DQ or a forfeit. You know, where was it? I watched on TV just a couple of days ago that they forfeited the belt, and I was like watching it. I was like, that was such a taboo, supposedly, but Bret Hart wanted to forfeit the belt, like it was unheard of, you know. But it's like, you know, anyway. But in closing, I'll just say that Shawn and I made a peace that was very real, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud that I dug deep into my own sort of soul and said, I'll make peace with this guy, even though I wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. And I can only say to people in life, in their own lives, you know, if you got something that's really eating away at you and kind of destroying you, dig it up and open it up and get it out of the way. You know, make peace with it and say goodbye. Like, don't keep dragging around a lot of pain. And that's what I learned from that whole thing with Shawn. And that was a good lesson to learn. Well,
man, I really appreciate you coming in here and taking some time to chat and bringing the family with you and bringing everybody. I would encourage everybody to go check out, you know, get online, look up House of Glory, find out when they're going to be doing a show near you. If it's drivable, go check out the show. There's not a lot of indie promotions left anymore that are professional and that have their stuff together and everything. And this is a group that does. So everybody check them out. And Bret, is there anything you want to promote or anything beyond House of Glory?
Blade, what about Sharpshooter Funding?
Yeah, we got a small funding company out of Calgary, Canada. It's going really well. We work for a guy out of the States called First Down Funding, and just check out the websites. Or
sharpshooterfunding.com?
Yes, sir.
Great. Cool. Well, thank you all for popping by, man. I really appreciate it.
All right.